Hi everyone, so excited for Morgan Franklin to sponsor Dynamics Con as a gold sponsor this year for our first time ever. If you haven't heard of us yet, Morgan Franklin is more than just an ERP consulting firm. We do everything from strategy and transformation to mergers and acquisitions, technical accounting support, cybersecurity, and more. Partnered with our parent company, Vaco, we reside in a lot of states that many of you may know our offices. We are so excited to bring you the best of Dynamics Consulting, along with the best of technical accounting, cybersecurity, and mergers and acquisition support. Our team can do anything from start to finish, no matter what the situation is, we're here to respond. We are so excited to be part of this conference, and I hope you join me for my sessions. We are located in most states, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to our team. We're very excited to partner with you. Thank you.
Please welcome our next speakers, Kristen Hosman, a senior consultant, and Shannon Mullins, a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft Practice Director. Today, they will be presenting top 20 things you should not do in Dynamics BC. Please stick around after their session for a live Q&A.
Thank you for attending our session today at Dynamics Con. Today, we're going to talk to you about the top 20 things you should not do in Dynamics 365 Business Central. My name is Kristen Hosman. I'm a Dynamics 365 Business Central consultant at Boyer & Associates. I also am on the advisory board here for Doug as well. Here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Mullins. I'm the Microsoft Practice Director at Morgan Franklin Consulting. We are based out of Washington, D.C., and I reside in Nashville, Tennessee. I am also a Microsoft MVP, like Kristen, of business applications, mostly focused in Dynamics 365 Business Central. And here's my contact information if you'd like to follow me. So the real question is, why are we here? We are so excited that our session was chosen to be presented here at Dynamics Con. And what we did is we went out and we took time to interview other consultants, ISVs, and produce a list of top 20 things that you should never do in Dynamics Business Central. So we're going to learn from each other's mistakes. We're going to figure out not only things to not do, but also how to correct them and how to do them the proper way. And we're very excited to present this presentation to you today. I'm going to kick off the slides over to Kristen, and Kristen, go ahead and take it away.
So before we get started, let's just give a thank you to Dynamics Con for this awesome event and hearing the community and being able to provide this awesome platform for the community leaders to present to the community. All right, the first tip that we have for you today is based on user security. So user security defines what the user has access to within the system, and it could be table-driven, window-driven, field-specific, things like that. So our first tip here is don't assign users the super user permission set unless they are system admin level, right? So that super user permission set does give that user permission to pretty much everything in the system, including security and being able to make copies of companies and things like that. So that's tip one. And then following up on that is don't forget to assign company specific user access as well. So within this user card, we can say, specific company as well. So if they need more access in one company than the other, then just make sure to update that as well. Do also look at the predefined user groups and permissions as well that are set up in the system, because sometimes you may pick a group that you think is good security for that user, but maybe they have access to other things as well. So customizing it a little bit goes into building out that user security as well.
Yeah, and Kristen, I just wanted to add to that things like configuration packages and edit in Excel, those are important to make sure that you're not giving access to everybody so they can just upload and change your data and they don't know what they're doing. So those are things that you probably want to look at within your security as well that you can lock down, on an individual level as well.
Great tip, Shannon. Thank you. All right, moving right along to number 2 tip. Don't adjust the system to meet your processes just because you can. First, try to adjust the processes to your system. So I do have Sean Dorward's tweet out here and Matthew Piron. These folks here decided to give this tip because they've seen it. They're consultants, they're dealing with implementations, and adjusting the system to meet your processes is not always the best solution. You are upgrading to a new system for a reason. So keep that in mind. And I'm sure, Shannon, you have a great story to add here for some of your clients as well.
Yeah, I have to say, Kristen, we have a lot of clients that move from other systems and they want to make Business Central just like their old system. But sometimes we just need to work with the system. I think one great thing about Business Central is you can personalize your windows, you can add extensions, you can use Power Apps and Power Automate. And you can use a lot of those features to make it what you want it to be. And then in the worst case scenario, you are going to customize it, but really the goal is to try to use it out of the box because it does have some great functionality. It's just the learning process can sometimes be the fun part.
Moving on to number 3, the change log. So the change log lets you track all direct modifications a user makes to data in the system. And this could be like a full vendor card, for example, or it could be a field like the tax ID number, for example. There also is set up in the system to let the system know how long they should keep that information, that log information, right? So this is one of those newest features, probably most underutilized features as well. But this is definitely something you should look at utilizing if your auditors are looking to figure out why things are changing in the system.
Yeah, and I love the comment on that, Kristen, that you just cannot don't underuse the change log. Definitely overuse it. For those reasons.
Moving on to number 4, direct posting. So remember to turn off the direct posting on all control accounts, right? So within the account card, there is a direct posting toggle there, and you can see that I have it turned on in the screenshot. You don't need that turned on for cash accounts, accounts receivable, inventory, AP, those subledger accounts that are having the transactions run through the subledger. You definitely don't want that turned on because then you run the risk of someone actually creating a journal entry to that account number and throwing the subledger out of balance with the general ledger. And Shannon, boy, do we know as consultants, like we get support cases all the time on, my subledger doesn't tie to the GL. What happened? How do I fix it? And this is honestly the first thing that I have them go look is go to the account card and prove to me that this is not checked, and then we can start digging into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many places you can just pick an account. If that's not possible, if that's not checked, you can just go pick those accounts. So definitely want to take care of that.
Number 5, extension management. So don't install new apps into the production environment without testing in a sandbox environment first. And I cannot preach this one enough because if you have custom code already in your production environment, when you bring in another customization like an app, you could run the risk of breaking something in your system. Maybe your functionality that you paid for doesn't work all of a sudden, right? So always test it in your sandbox environment first.
100%. And the nice thing is you get 3 sandboxes. So choose one and make it your app sandbox.
That's actually a really good idea to make an app sandbox. I didn't think about that one, but I think I'm going to utilize that because I just had a client right before go live email me and he's like, I just installed this extension for expense reports and I wanted to test it out. And now this other thing isn't working. And I'm like, you did it in Sandbox, right? And he's like, no, production. And I'm like, oh, right before go live. Like I just like my heart sank, but thankfully it didn't break anything. We were able to get it uninstalled. Number 6, personalization. So avoid having users personalize their own environments. Instead, utilize profile roles so that personalizations only have to be done once and they can be shared across other users within your organization. I do have a link here to the video that I did for the first DynamicsCon event on this topic on personalizing Business Central. And we talk about this topic for that 45-minute period there. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go ahead and check that out. Number 7, allow posting from and allow posting to. So there is a global setting within the general ledger setup window that you put in the dates that you want to allow users to be able to post to, right? So that is a global setting that is going to affect all your users that are logged into that company. We do want you to use this because this is the only way to lock down periods where you don't want people to post to. So utilize that window. And then if there are users like a controller or an accountant, for example, that needs to be able to post to prior periods that aren't even in that window, you can set that up on the user setup card under user security. So you're able to then give them that access to maybe post to a prior year, for example. Don't forget to shortcut and personalize. So Business Central allows the user to somewhat kind of develop and create shortcuts and really personalize their own environment, right? So utilizing the personalization by role or individuals to move fields, add fields, change column orders, hide dashboard items, and really add bookmarks too. So I know in a previous slide I said try to limit user personalization so that you can utilize the role profile roles. And really that is so that you can share those across the organization. But there's always going to be some users that just need to have it customized a little bit more. So this is a really helpful tip here. Just don't forget about it. Don't forget that it exists. And if you don't see the personalize button under your settings tab, make sure to talk to your system admin and have them add that to your security as well.
Yeah, the nice thing is you can create your dashboard to essentially be whatever you want, Kristen. So a lot of people say, I don't like it seeing my name in big letters when I log in, or I want to see my Power BI reports and nothing else, or whatever the case may be. Like, the nice thing about BC is you're not stuck with those dashboards. You can kind of make them your own, as long as you're not locked out, of course.
So our number 9 tip here involves posting groups. So don't limit posting groups to just one, right? So there may be situations where you have 2 AR accounts or 2 AP accounts, different things like that, where you need to utilize different natural account numbers for that. So utilize the posting groups to make your life easier, right? And then assign those posting groups correctly at the vendor level, the customer level, maybe the item level. And then also remember that you can report off of posting groups as well. And you can also use for a combination of a GL account posting settings as well.
Yeah, it's a really great way if you're coming from other systems that had classes or, groupings of some sort of customers and vendors and items, that you can kind of group them together and not only share GL accounts, because usually they would, but also use those to kind of use them as categories instead of a dimension. So that's, another option you have with the posting groups.
Moving on to number 10 here is just don't use out of the box reporting, right? This is one of our biggest tips here is you have Jet reports, you have Power BI, you have Excel OData connections that you can use within like the web services window in Business Central. But if you can't get the reports to work the way you want them to in Business Central, instead of investing time and money into getting those customized, maybe look at one of these other options. Power BI, there's a free license out there for desktop version that you can connect to your Business Central environment and kind of pull that data in and mold it a different way too, right? And then also using Power BI, there is that dashboard connection as well, that you can link those two together so you can actually see those reports then in Business Central. So make sure you're utilizing those tools just to make your experience in Business Central even better.
Yeah, 100% agree. And for tips and tricks on BC and Power BI, definitely check out Belinda Allen and all the work she's doing with her blog and different webinars. I think she's actually doing a session here at DynamicsCon, and she does a great job at connecting BC data with Power BI, which is, 100% recommended for your reporting. All right. Well, I'm going to kick it off with number 11. Number 11, the Outlook adapter. This is probably a very underutilized feature of Business Central, and I don't feel like a lot of partners who are implementing or people that are implementing on their own really understand the capabilities with the Outlook adapter, but it is so powerful. It does work directly inside of Outlook. So you can go directly inside of Outlook. You can see insights into your leads. You can create contacts. You can create companies, vendors, and then you can create all of these things. So let's say a new lead emails me and I want to add them into the system as an account or as a opportunity. I can actually put them into the system and then associate them later on down the road with the company, which is super, it's a nice feature to have. You can also do new documents from Outlook. So for instance, if you're an AP clerk and you get an invoice from a vendor, rather than leave the screen in Outlook and save it and come back in, you can actually key it in directly from Outlook. I do want to show this one because I think it's so powerful. It's something that we should see. So I'm going to come here into my Outlook, and for the sake of time and to make sure my Outlook add-in is working, I've actually come in here and taken an email from the Nashville Business Journal, just find some random contact in here. The nice thing is once you have the Outlook adapter on, whether you're in Outlook in the cloud, which I call new school, or Outlook desktop, old school, Business Central will show up. It is this little tiny, looks like a lifesaver. I still don't really understand what the icon is, but it's here. Or if you go to your three little ellipses over here to the right of your email, you'll actually see it down here as well. So you have it in two different spots here. I usually like to click on this just because it makes it a little quicker. And then I have my different options here. So I have contact insights, and then I have a drop down of new documents I can do right from here. Let's go ahead and click on Contact Insights because I want to talk about that real quick. With Contact Insights, if Nashville Business Journal has been set up as a company in my system, now when we think of companies, we're going to talk about it in terms of CRM, that I can have vendors or I can have customers, or I can also have leads. And so a contact is not necessarily one or the other. It can be any of those combinations. And so as I come in here, Nashville Business Journal, I've already made them a customer. And if I want to, I can come in here and I can edit them. I can view their information. And so, if they change their name, I can change their name in here. Maybe they have a new collector, maybe they have a credit limit, their address, anything like that. What happens when a vendor sends you a new email and they're like, hey, update my email or update my address or these things? Typically we leave the email and we go into our ERP system and we make those changes. Well, you can do all of that right from here. And the nice part is this going to publish right back into BC, which is great. The other thing I can do is if I go back here to my new button, I can also create new documents from here. So let's say Nashville Business Journal was my customer and they sent me an email saying, hey, go ahead and send me an invoice or send me an order form for what I'd like to purchase. And of course, this is going to be very slow with hotel Wi-Fi. But I can come in here and I can actually create new documents directly from Outlook. And of course, everything works slow when you're trying to demo it. Is that not the case, Kristen? So we'll let that load for a second. But you can create your new documents. So you can create invoices, orders, quotes, whatever the case may be, you can create that directly from here. Do also have the capability of seeing things like balances, past due amounts, life-to-date sales, year-to-date sales, customer history. You can add and save notes about a customer directly from Outlook or a vendor. And it's just a really, really nice functionality and capability. Love this adapter. Number 12, avoid using special characters. This is like any ERP system. If you have master records or master indexes that are leading back to some kind of database, whether that's SQL or an Access database or Pervasive or whatever the case may be, you do not want to use special characters in any kind of ID. And the reason is that a lot of times when you go to run queries in those tools and things like Jet Reports here that's in our sample, if the special character is in the ID, typically if you go to run a query, the query will not read the special character. So I've had this happen with databases where I'm trying to change ID numbers or look up IDs in a query and it comes back and says no records found. You have an error in your SQL script and you're like, wait, hold on. And you realize it's a special character. So we don't want to do things like ampersands, at symbols, dashes. So I would make it consistent. I would make it either alpha or numeric or a combination of both, but we just don't want to use special characters in them. And that usually has to do with reporting and inquiries. So not recommended. Number 13 on our list, closing the income statement. So this is important in any system. You want to make sure that your accounts that you're setting up are set up correctly, so income or balance sheet. And you are going to want to make sure that you run a statement validation before you close your year. Because for many of you that are accountants, if you know, sometimes people don't pay attention when they run accounts or when they set them up. And so they'll create a new account or copy a new account, and they won't pay attention to whether or not it's an income or balance account. And so at the end of the year, they go to close the year and the balance doesn't roll over or the balance clears, and they don't realize that, oops, I didn't set that up correctly. So before you close the year, you definitely want to run a chart of accounts list, and you want to make sure that all your balance sheet accounts are showing as balance sheet and all your income accounts are showing as income. One recommendation I have is that you also put on a chart of account workflow. So there's that capability where you can have accounts approved before they get put into place, or just use an edit list. But also remember that you need to also close at a dimension level. So make sure you're doing all of those closings, you're running them correctly. And I would recommend having a year-end checklist of everything that you need to close so that you're ready to prepare for the end of the year. Kristen, any tips from you on that end?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of where you can use that change log on that field, that income balance field, because, there might be times throughout the year where someone might accidentally change that. So having that on a change log is a good idea. And then another thing I want to mention is, when Shannon and I were looking for ideas of our top 20 tips, this tip actually came in outside of that. So a few weeks ago, we're in February and everyone's trying to close their year end. And this was actually brought up, like, what if you forget to change this and you close your year end? And there were a few of us on social media just talking like, we don't even know how Business Central would handle that, because right now you can't reverse the year. Having that checklist that Shannon talked about, and in that checklist, including screenshots, that's another tip. Like, make sure you have screenshots in there and you're highlighting things to look at, so that when that person who created that document is no longer at the company and it's someone new, it's clear, they can understand it, right? Because sometimes the Microsoft documentation isn't always the best, right? So you have to create your own documentation that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I agree, Kristen. I would definitely personally take a copy of my company before I close the year. And then afterwards, just validate all the balances rolled and everything looks good. And then, you always have that copy that you can restore to, which is always important, just in case, since it is such a pain when you do have to go back and fix it if it's not done correctly. Number 14, new processes. So you should not be testing out new processes in a production environment, especially if it means you're going to turn on new functionality in that environment. Within Business Central, there's so many complex ERP connections into distribution and fixed assets and jobs and manufacturing, or whatever the case is, whatever you're using, there's so many connection points between all the different modules. And so it's just not as easy as, oh, we're going to go turn on manufacturing tomorrow. Like, we want to take manufacturing. So what I would recommend, I don't even recommend using a test company, but I recommend taking a copy of your production and putting it into a sandbox. And in that sandbox environment, do all your thorough testing, make sure everything looks good. Of course, if you make changes in the sandbox to make it work, then you're going to want to go back to your production environment and make them there as well. But you definitely want to do all your testing in your sandbox, have a thorough testing plan, make sure everyone has tested. So make sure your users sign off on testing and then move that into production. It's just the same as apps. You just don't want to put things in process that could slow people down, create havoc in month end, and then also just, make people very frustrated in your organization.
I will add to this, Shannon, that sometimes new processes mean maybe having to contact your partner, getting that plan in place, right? For example, workflows, there's tons of out-of-the-box options where you can just click on a workflow pretty quickly. But if you're doing that in your production environment and you're starting to transact in there, the system's looking for those approvers, right, on those transactions moving forward once it's turned on. So those are just some things to think about, right, when you're thinking about adding new processes to the system.
Yeah, 100%. And your partner's here to help you. Don't try to tackle it on your own and call them later and say, we tried to do this and it wasn't very successful. How do you help us fix it? That's usually more expensive than being proactive and helping having them help you plan it, which is the best part. So configuration packages, this is one of those things I was talking about in security. So important to lock down. Configurations can make major changes to your database records, to your table records. And you definitely want to make sure that the people who are running configuration packages truly know what they're doing. And so configuration packages, if you don't know what they are, they allow you to import and update information in your system. Really kind of cool because you can take table data, you can update it and push it back in. The problem is there is a button that you have to press that makes sure that you don't delete the table records before processing, which means instead of like updating records, you're actually deleting records. And this is very important if you're pushing things in like journal entries or bank transactions or even vendors. So you'll notice here there is this little delete table records button. You're going to want to make sure that you uncheck it before processing so you do not wipe out the table. That's pretty important. So make sure that you're paying attention with configuration packages. I've had a lot of folks be like, oh, we just let anyone run a configuration package. We're not worried about it, but you could really wipe out some tables and not be able to get that data back. So the other thing I would recommend is if you're going to export the config pack, that maybe you want to export the table data as well, just so you have it for a backup in that case.
Oh, Shannon, part of this segment is us telling our listeners the bad stories, right? And I actually have a client that is getting ready to go live here come April, and consultants do this too, right? Like this box is checked and we get new data from our clients and we want to get that uploaded as soon as possible. Well, when that box is checked, it's checked. You go to close this window and you reopen it and you're not watching, you're not noticing that checkbox, and you go to upload something, even if it's additional records that need to be uploaded, it's actually going to clear out the table and only import in what you're trying to import in. So actually had this happen where another consultant on bill of materials actually wiped out all the hard work that he and the client had did in the previous weeks because he forgot to uncheck that when he was making additional add-ins, right? So even consultants make errors, which is why it's so important at a user level. Users don't understand these windows. They don't understand the power behind them. They may have watched their partner utilize the tool to maybe implement the system, so they think they know how it works. But in reality, all it takes is one time, right? One person not to know to look at that, and now you've lost data.
Microsoft is taking snapshots of your database, so hopefully you would be able to restore it. But again, like it's one of those things I think you should take a company copy if you're making major master record changes, and at least you have a backup to restore to. But you'd also want to just make sure, with any other system updates that nobody's in the system. And so if you do have to restore, you're not losing work. And so, it's just one of those things that it's important to pay attention to do it, but it's also important to just have a backup plan in case it goes wrong. All right. Number 16, don't use the same number series for GL batches. So this is something a lot of my users have run into on the GL posting side, and this is the recommendation from Microsoft. So usually you're using a rolling number on your journal entries and using this with the number series. If those of you who don't know number series, you can create as many number series as you want typically for your documents. And those are rolling numbers that are tracking the transactions throughout the system. And so when you use the same GL number series, if two people are posting the batch at the same time, you'll get posting errors because it will actually lock the records. And so it's like two people can take the same number and try to post it. So it is recommended if you have different GL batches to have different GL batch series numbers, which is an interesting thing. I think that that needs to be changed in future releases with ideas personally. But we have run into this a lot, especially with lots of users who are posting lots of journal entries at once. So it is recommended by Microsoft themselves. Number 17, don't forget to use Power Automate. So Power Automate has so many cool functionalities within Business Central. You're going to see it a lot in all of the windows where you request approval. There's about a million things you can have approvals on in Business Central. And when you go to request an approval, you can actually use Power Automate to trigger your workflows instead of the Business Central out of the box. I will say it's so much easier to work with Power Automate to build out your workflows. So I highly recommend it. If you haven't tried it before, if you go out to my link in the deck, you will see that you can go out and see all the Business Central connectors. So you can grab any of the approval ones. There's also some really nice out of the box templates where you can do things like send an email when a new customer is created, or send an email when a new vendor is created. So there's a lot of cool automation that you can do. I've used Power Automate to do things like every time a new customer survey is created in customer voice, go ahead and create a new customer. Every time a new customer is created, go ahead and send them an email and welcome them to the company. Things like that you can use Power Automate for. You can also use it to move data between systems. So get in push data. And then you can use it with Power Apps, which is pretty cool as well. So if you haven't checked out Power Automate, we highly recommend it. It is included with your Business Central plan.
Yeah, Shannon, and if I could just kind of throw something in here, Shannon kind of alluded to it, but bringing data into the system. I just finished doing a implementation for an ISV in the community, and they actually utilize a different tool for all their customer billing and all their reoccurring billing. So we were able to use APIs, link it into Power Automate, and actually bring in those sales invoices right back into Business Central so that nobody had to manually key them in, manually import them in, but the system is really doing the work for you.
That's a great point, Kristen. And I just did a demo where we actually used customer voice used to be Microsoft Forms to create a new customer application that we emailed to the customer. And when they filled it out and hit submit, it actually went into BC and created the customer automatically with all the fields that they entered, and then submitted it for workflow through the accounting department. And so that saves so much time. You know, there's so many use cases for Power Automate because it really is meant to make your life easier in Business Central. And I think it's a very, very underutilized feature within Business Central as well. All right. Don't forget to use budgets and forecasts. So there are multiple budgets and forecasts within BC, a lot. There's budgets by sales, there's budgets by items, customers, vendors, fixed assets. So most people think about budgets and they're talking about financial budgets, which you can obviously do. But BC has a lot of capabilities to budget by any of these things. And then you also can use that for reporting purposes and to bring that into like Power BI and within Jet reports as well, or just on the account schedule. So definitely recommend having your budgets and putting your budgets into Business Central. But it also has a really nice capable cash flow I can talk today. Cash flow forecast with smart forecasting. So you can go out and actually tell BC how to predict your cash and set your settings up. You can have multiple different cash flow forecasts. And then it actually comes out in more like a BI type report where you can see based on month, based on change in cash, based on, future forecasts, what is your cash going to look like and where is it bucketed? So it's a really nice capability. I think a lot of people forget to use some of these nice features that are just embedded in Business Central, and they don't implement them at first. But if you're not using budgets or forecasts within BC, I would definitely set it up and use it. This is a big one. Don't forget to use APIs and OData. So within Business Central, you have web services, and web services is what goes out and exposes your BC data. You allow it to be exposed, but you expose that BC data via an API key. And when you do that, you can use that data in a variety of forms. So Power BI is one of them. You can take your data, grab the OData or the SOAP URLs, push it into Power BI and pull and push your data from the tables. You can also do it in Excel. So I've created a lot of these reports where I go into Excel and I bring the query directly in Excel and refresh it from Excel using, again, just a URL. You can use it in SQL reports and create your own SQL reports that way. You can use it for your integration connections. You can use it in Power Automate. There's so many ways that you can use this data. And the nice thing, it is secure because you can turn on and turn off any table or query. And you also can enforce an API key so that people are authenticating as they're accessing your data. But there's so many cool features that you can do with it. And if you go into web services inside BC and just search for web services, you will see all your tables, your queries, your data, and you can take that data and you can pull it into any of these tools, which is really, really cool. And if you know how to create extensions, you can actually take an extension and publish your own API query and then use that again in any of those data sources that I mentioned. All right, last but not least, number 20, don't forget to install the mobile app. Most people don't use the mobile app because BC is in the cloud. They don't feel like they need it as much, but it's really great for people that are on the go. Your controllers, your CFOs, your salespeople, people that need to access data from BC fairly easily without having to log into a URL. We all know that on our mobile devices, web pages just don't look the same. So there is an app. You can get it in an app source. There's also an app for Windows. So there is a desktop app for Windows as well. And you can view or create your BC data directly from the mobile app. You can view your Power BI dashboards. You can create new transactions. The only thing I've noticed that you really can't do is you cannot create payments from the mobile app, which is probably a good thing. But anything else inside of Business Central, you can create using the mobile app. And it's really nice functionality. I have a link back here to go into and view the documentation on the mobile app and how easy it is to use. The nice thing is you don't have to do a lot of configuration. You just download it and you log in with your Office credentials, just like you do anything else, and you're ready to go. Awesome. So a couple other best practices. Don't share usernames and passwords. That's so important. Your username and password should be your Office 365 password. So make sure you're not sharing those within the office, especially API keys. We want to keep those locked down. Have a customization developed without requiring the source code and design documentation from your developer or partner. I've had several people reach out to me the last month and say, I have a lot of customizations, but I don't have the code and I don't have the documentation from the developer. I also don't have the extensions. This is something you don't want to do. If you are a customer or an end user, you want to make sure that you're requesting your code, requesting the documentation, and making sure it's all designed and documented. So that way, in case something happens to your partner or you leave, or new people start, they know what your custom code is and how to decode it. Also, don't forget to use Microsoft Learn. If you go to Microsoft Learn, you will find all kinds of courses on Business Central, from beginner courses to intermediate courses, courses that will help you study for the Business Central exam, which you can take online. And it's a really great resource and it's free with your Business Central licensing. And then last but not least, leverage your community. We're here to help. I would say everybody presenting in this conference is very active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Discord, so many different places, including the Microsoft forums and the Dynamics user group community. And so if you go to any of these forums, you put in your questions, you need help, we're all here to help you. And we're so excited to be here teaching you and helping you learn best practices within Business Central. Kristen, I know it's been an honor always presenting with you, and so thankful to Dynamics Con for inviting us this year to teach at this conference.
Right. Thanks, Shannon. Same to you. And just before we wrap up, we are going to hang around for questions here a little bit longer, so you can go into the chat. And if you've stuck with us throughout this whole presentation, you do know that we threw a lot of tips in there, and not just things not to do in Business Central. And Shannon and I actually had a conversation about this, after we put together this presentation. Business Central is a pretty stable solution out there, and there's a lot of unutilized things, which is why we did throw a lot of tips in here as well. So don't hate on us for doing 20 tips of things to do and things not to do when the title was things you shouldn't do.
Great point, Kristen. Thank you, everybody. Looking forward to talking to you in the chat.
Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon.
We are live.
We are. Shannon, it was nice of you to come to Colorado just so we could meet together and do this Q&A together. However, for those of you who are watching here, Shannon got snowed in over the weekend in Colorado. So she is actually joining us today from the Denver airport. She's trying to get home today. So please excuse if there's some feedback or some loud noises in the background. But Shannon, we had a great session here. Thank you for joining me. And we have tons of questions that came in, so let's jump to it. The first one here, Shannon, that I want you to touch on, if you could please, is about special characters. So Ted Johnston had asked, is a dash considered a special character?
You know, Kristen, I've had a lot of problems in Excel with dashes, and a lot of people take their data, they put it into Excel, they put it into SQL, and they think a dash is okay, you know, and some people do like the dashes, some people are fine with it. If you're not exporting your data or using it in another data source, that should be fine, you know, but most of the time it is a problem.
Right. Yeah. So Clark said exactly the same thing within the chat. So for those of you who are joining us, we're going to go through the chat and answer some of these questions. So if you weren't keeping track of those questions and answers in the chat, we'll try and get them here as well. Stephanie Rasmussen had asked, is the change log available to third-party apps? And Saurav did jump in on that and said, yes, you know, as long as you know what that table number is, then you can set that up within the change log.
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing I noticed, somebody asked if budgets are multi-currency, and the answer is yes. So if you are using multi-currency, you can budget in whatever currency you need to budget. You can have multiple budgets, you know, per module, whatever that is. So definitely, you know, make sure you set up your budgets. Even if you're using multi-currency, that shouldn't be something that stops you from using, you know, your budgets.
All right. Well, the next thing here that I do want to talk about is Richard had asked a question more surrounding Power Automate examples. And his question was, is there a place where users can share Power Automate examples, reports, etc., to help springboard visibility? And I can touch on that one a little bit. So within Power Automate, Microsoft does have quite a few templates out there already built for you. And what I found in learning Power Automate myself is if you start with those and kind of look at the logic, you can start building your own. But how cool would it be if Dynamics User Group gave us the opportunity to kind of have that, you know, within the forms and be able to ask those questions and share some templates that we've already done.
Yeah, I think that's great, Kristen. I think a lot of people are sharing Power Apps code and Power Automate code outside of VC, but it would be really great to have a forum to do that. I just recommend getting in there and messing around with it. So I did a really great blog post on using customer voice to create new customers based on a customer survey, and then push that data into VC and then trigger a workflow. And that's really, it took me about 5 minutes to do. So when I say it's super, super easy, it's very, very easy to do. So, you know, I just recommend getting in there and messing around with it. That's the funnest part about it, right? Is you can't lose unless you're getting paid to do it, right? Someone had mentioned, Kristen, they wanted to see they want to see what would we recommend at the top 3 things to do, because that session didn't get chosen. So I'll let you go first with your first recommendation of something to do in Business Central.
Yeah, so that is a great question. So Shannon and I historically have been doing like the top 20 things not to do and top 20 things to do historically with Dynamics GP. And we did submit both sessions here for Dynamics Con, and the one that got submitted was the things not to do. So the things to do, I guess the biggest tip I would say is use the bank reconciliation feature within Business Central, because I cannot tell you how many implementations I've done for clients going to Business Central, and they are doing bank rec outside of the system in Excel. It's just a bad practice in my mind. So that's my number 1 tip, is utilize that bank reconciliation tool.
Yeah, I think my number 1 tip would be to use Jet reports. So I have so many people trying to use account schedules, out of the box reports, and why those are great. And I know there's a huge following of account schedules on this chat, so I won't say too much about them. They're not my favorite. They remind me of Management Reporter, but Jet is so easy to use. It's so cheap. to connect. And I've helped a lot of clients who are coming from out of the box BC reporting who are just super, super frustrated. And the second they see Jet, they're like, okay, that just changed my life, right? Because it's data in the cloud. And in order to get that data in the cloud down to Excel, Jet just makes it really easy for that adapter. So that would be my number one recommendation. I know it's not a BC recommendation, but it will make your life so much easier.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of playing on that, because now I've had time to think, utilizing Power BI, utilizing Power Automate for workflows, especially since, the out of the box workflows, they can't handle every scenario, right? So being open to utilizing these other tools that Microsoft is giving you access to would be another tip. All right, Shannon. So kind of switching gears here. How do you feel about testing new processes within your production environment? Now, it could be within your production company or a test company, but it's within that production environment. Do you have any horror stories before I share mine?
Yeah, I think it's so easy for people to go in and make mistakes. We have a couple clients that have gone live where a lot of people have a lot of security rights, and they've made changes into production that are affecting a lot of processes in manufacturing. So I highly recommend that you do this in your sandbox. You have 3 in BC Cloud, which is the nice part, so use those sandboxes, do your testing, and then move it to production.
Right. So I actually have 2 stories I'll share, and I see that Steve Indo is on here as well in the chat. Recently, I had a client contact me and say, hey, within the vendor window, we have, your balance due, your payments, you have those columns, right? And what's interesting is if you go and pay a vendor and then void it out, that payment amount is still showing there. So this is a perfect example because in this case, the client was actually testing something in their production environment, and now they have, found this issue, right, with these totals here. So Steve took it upon himself to kind of try and hopefully figure out a solution for that. But that's not the example I was actually gonna share with you. The example I was gonna share is something different, and it involves a custom extension built for a client for an importing into the cash receipts journal. And for this specific thing, it was just importing in, right? So we put it in production and we started testing it, and come to find out that even though we were importing into the cash receipts journal, we were having a negative effect on the payment journal. It was airing out. And the reason is because the developer had reused some code that they had written for the payment journal specifically, and they didn't get that taken out, right? So that's a situation where now we have this code in production environment and everybody's getting errors when they're trying to post this payment journal, and they're coming yelling at us. So, I mean, us consultants were guilty of it too, but definitely try and put that stuff in a sandbox environment first, just to test that out and see if there are going to be any issues.
Yeah, that's a good one, Kristen. I know someone put in the chat, should I ditch Power BI for Jet reports? The answer is absolutely not. I think you can use both in combination. I did a class on reporting one year at Summit, and it doesn't matter what system you're in. You're going to have a variety of reports. You're going to have visual reports. You're going to have detailed financial reports, detailed transaction reports. The nice thing about Power BI is it's free, so it's not going to cost you anything to use Power BI. And you can go and check out Belinda's blog and all her great tips on Power BI. But Jet Reports is going to give you more of that detailed financial statement, multiple books, multiple different types of financial statements. So that's where I would recommend Jet over Power BI. But use both, and use the in-the-box reporting. Take some classes on account schedules and learn those as well. There's no wrong way when it comes to reporting.
Right. So we do have a question in the chat here from Tom France. His question is, how does enabling change logs affect performance? All right. So
I've seen a lot of this, Kristen. when you're trying to go through a change log and find something in BC, if you've had a lot of changes happen, it does take a while to filter it. So what I've had some clients do is dump this into an OData feed or dump it into SharePoint as a list that can be easily searched. You may not want to check your change logs inside BC. I have noticed it does not slow down performance, but it's really hard to go through all those rows of records to find what you need, is what I'm seeing.
Right. And then another thing just kind of regarding change logs is review that retention period as well. You know, don't keep everything forever. So that's just another tip there. Richard early on said, I've been told you need to develop role center views or dashboards. How can we easily change these? I think that was in regards to when we were talking about personalizing Business Central, but correct me if I'm wrong in the chat here if you're still on the call, Richard. But, you know, if you're utilizing profile roles and you have access to that window, you can easily go in and kind of tweak things on the fly as needed, which is why it's so nice to have profile roles set up in the first place. Everybody can share that same personalization rather than having to do it on their own computer.
There was also a question, Kristen. Can you use Power Automate to create records from one company to another? And the answer is yes, you can absolutely do that. I know someone has developed an app on AppSource, and I cannot think of the company right now. And obviously you can't flip through AppSource to find it. But I have installed one installer. There is somebody who's developed an app for that where you can have triggers from one database to another. Think of company copy in terms of Dynamics GP. But you could use Power Automate. So you could say every time a new record is created, go over into this database and create it over there. That would be super simple to do. Or if you're just going to have a lot of different companies inside BC and you don't want a lot of databases, then I would recommend binary stream multi-entity management for that.
All right, and our friend Steve Indo did just put in the chat here in regards to change logs. His recommendation is, you know, not to select a lot of tables and fields, only select what you need to track. So for example, the vendor table, for example, maybe it's the tax ID number that you're really worried about people changing, something like that. All right, let's see here. Kim did let us know, Shannon, that to fix an account that was set to an income statement is not difficult after close. So that's a good one. I don't want to run into that on my own. Doesn't sound like a fun thing. And then we did have David Singleton. When you were talking about the number series, Shannon, you know, that situation actually just happened for one of my clients. They went live and I got kind of a hate email on, you know, they have two accountants and one is creating a journal and another is creating a journal and they're separate batches, but they have the same document number inside and they're posting, you know, with that same document number. So David had mentioned to check out the recent new feature for non-blocking number series, which in some cases can resolve the blocking issue in the journal posting. So I'm not sure if those kind of correlate there, but I'll definitely have to look into that.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I know the recommendation from Microsoft is to have two different number series running, so I'll have to check that out. That sounds interesting. I did see somebody ask, is edit in Excel or open in Excel replacing jet reports? 100% no. That's not even close. That is a great feature for editing records and opening them quickly, but there's a huge difference with what jet can do. So if you haven't seen jet, you probably want to check that out so you can answer that for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And then Paul just mentioned here, can the Excel add-on for BC deal with fairly complex linking of tables? You know, can do that in jet reports, but haven't considered the Excel add-on. And, you know, I definitely wouldn't call it that. But what I will say is you do have access to web services. So if you're used to being able to utilize like a refreshable or an Excel refreshable report, something like that, you could utilize that. I just had a client actually not want to learn anything new. They didn't want to learn Power BI right now, but they wanted the general ledger entries in Excel so that they could manipulate that data and then refresh it. So we did utilize Excel for that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Kristen, it may be hard to link the tables in order to do that. So that would be where I don't recommend doing that. I would recommend definitely using Jet for that purpose. It's like I said, you can do some things, but it's going to be a little bit harder with others. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
Right. Can you post documents with Power Automate as well? Yes and no, right? So just like out of the box workflows for purchase invoices, for example, you can turn on auto posting for those once they're approved, but you can't do it for the general journal. So I would just be wary of that auto posting.
Definitely, if you have not checked out job queues inside of BC before, definitely check them out. There are job queues where you can go and post documents. So you can run reports, you can post documents, you can change document statuses, and essentially just think of it as like what we used to call, my brain is like lost right now, but when we used to write SQL queries and then we would use triggers inside of SQL. So essentially that's like a job queue. So you say, when this document is the status, go ahead and post it, and it will post it and then print those reports. Definitely utilize job queues for that kind of stuff. You don't need Power Automate.
Right. All right. So we're getting down to the end of our Q&A here. So if you have any other questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. Thank you to everyone for asking. And then there's so many people in here who are responding and giving their feedback as well. So thank you for helping us out. But if you have any horror stories, if you have anything on your list of things not to do, go ahead and throw that in the chat as well so we can bring a spotlight to that. Yes, Jamie. Jamie just mentioned, job queues are awesome, but partners cannot run them, right? Because we're a delegated admin. So she's absolutely right. And same with workflows too. So if you're a partner, you'll probably need to set up a user with a license to test out workflows. Even in Power Automate as well, I ran into that issue. So just something to keep in mind there.
Kristen, I want to just throw out that it's pretty awesome that we had a whole conversation about effect versus effect during a BC conference. So that's how amazing this community is. And it's been great chatting with you guys in this forum. I know, there's so many questions, and hopefully I think we got about a minute left. But thank you all for joining us and allowing us to present here at this Dynamics Con. Very, very excited to be here. Thank you to John and Molly and everybody else who has just put this together. What an amazing conference.
All right, Shannon, here's one from Debbie. If connecting to Dynamics 365 sales, do you recommend quotes, invoices, etc. be created in Business Central and pushed to CRM?
So most of the time I'm seeing orders created in CRM and then pushed to BC and then invoiced. But you can go all the way up to an invoice and then push that over, just so everybody knows there's an automatic connector, which is the best part. So use that automated connector. I have a whole webinar out there somewhere in the World Wide Web about that. Love D365 for sales and love it with BC. And Kristen, it looks like they're about to cut us off, which is really sad. We got our wrap up time here.
Yeah, well, Shannon, thank you for joining me from the airport. Appreciate it. And thankfully, it wasn't too noisy in the background, at least what I was hearing when you were talking. Hopefully you make it home. And I will see you again on Thursday back in Colorado.
Enjoy my session tomorrow with Steve Endo. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.